All right, hey guys, we're going to talk about the counterculture today. And so in the background, I've got the Beatles playing, which has been voted best band of all time. They're going to come out during this time and produce the majority of their albums together during the 60s and counterculture movement. So our essential questions: in what ways did the youth of the 60s rebel against their traditional families and upbringing? Remember, they're going to come out of this baby boom, and their parents are going to be the traditional 50s parents, like Leave It to Beaver. So keep that in mind as I'm teaching you about this new generation. And why did these youth rebel? Okay, so let's start with the counterculture. It says counterculture was this new lifestyle enacted by the youth of the 60s based on rebellious dress, rebellious music, drug use, communal living. It totally rewrote the book on how a youth was going to live their life. Definitely not the 50s poodle skirt, yes ma'am, no ma'am, with their hair just right, very well kept, very neat, respectful of their parents. None of that. Okay. It says many, many hippies want to drop out of society by living home, and they wanted to live in communes, which is basically just living together. They share everything. They work together. They do everything together. Everything. Okay. One of the most famous hippie destinations is going to be in San Francisco, and it's called the Haight-Ashbury District. I want to show you a picture. This is George Harrison, who is the drummer for the Beatles, and he's no longer living, but at the time, this is him walking down one of the streets there in Haight-Ashbury. See the cigarette in his mouth, the longer hair here, the sunglasses. This was his wife, I believe, at the time. Long hair, the glasses, hippie stuff. Okay, so very much counterculture. All right, and that commune was literally just everyone lives together. The reports, though, the history that I read about it said there was almost like no place to sleep. There was so many people living in these apartments and houses around this district. People living out in their vans. That was very, very common. Okay, as to the dress, most hippies wore very cheap clothing. They repaired them themselves with patches and things like that, just to try to show that they're not going to go out shopping. They're not going to buy into the capitalistic society. Native dress was very popular, so you see beads, fringe from like Native Americans, tie-dyed shirts, of course, from any kind of techniques used in Africa or India, very popular. So very like natural looking clothing or back to nature. The dress code of these hippies, or flower children they're also called, included the men with very long hair, unkept beards, women with bare feet, bralessness, no bras. Okay, and all of them wore blue jeans. If they had on pants, which was questionable. Sometimes they didn't do that. It would be blue jean. Okay, long hair, heavy facial hair, direct opposition of the 50s. Think about the Leave It to Beaver episode we watched and the dad, where he was very, very clean cut, very clean shaven, hair very short, buzz cut, all that. This is totally rejecting that. It also rejects the military influence of short hair and crisp dress and all that. Okay, let me see. Well, this is a good example of a hippie couple. Okay, and you see his long hair and the headband, and he doesn't have on a shirt. He's just got this one, his arms through the sleeves, and his sleeves half rolled up. Here she is with her cigarette or joint, possibly, her head or bandana on her head, different braids in her hair, no bra on, most likely, sitting out in the middle of a field. Most likely this was at Woodstock, but there was so many people at Woodstock, we can't be sure. But they would go to outdoor concerts and things like that. Okay, so music. Bob Dylan is going to bring about a folk music kind of generation here. And then you got rock and roll by the Rolling Stones, Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, and then the British invasion, the Beatles. The Beatles come in, okay? So I'll have a picture of that to show you of their Abbey Road album. Very famous album. And Abbey Road is a road in London. And it's known by this zebra stripe on basically it's a crosswalk. And they took a photo of themselves walking across, and they called it Abbey Road, the album, Abbey Road. There they are, and this guy's holding up the actual CD cover, album cover, on that street in present day. Now, I've been there when I was in college. I think I've told you guys that I went to Europe over the summer, and the group I was with, a couple of the guys just went like insane over seeing Abbey Road, and they were making all these pictures. And they wanted to walk across. They wanted us to take pictures of them walking across as if they were the Beatles. And I thought this was the dumbest thing ever. I'm sorry to admit that to you, but I was not a Beatles fan in college. They were way before my time. Okay, but anyway, I still wasn't a Beatles fan, so I thought this was kind of crazy. But you can see basically there's this build up. So many people, millions of people bought into the Beatles. And this is sort of after the onslaught of Elvis Presley. So they're going to be the band that everyone listens to of that time period. Okay? And then also came Woodstock. So this is probably the most well-known outdoor concert of all time in the United States. August of '69. It was held at Bethel, upstate New York. 400,000 teenagers, young people, indulged in 3 days. Constant music, okay? 400,000. What I have watched several videos on it and read up on it, and basically they thought maybe a couple thousand people would show up. So they didn't have enough food, they didn't have enough anything. But of course, these folks are going to bring with them a drug invasion. So they're going to bring plenty of drugs, not really wanting to eat, and public sex. So this is so out of the norm of the 50s, okay? Totally 180 from that time period. All right, so 3 days of rock music, drugs, and sex. I want to show you a picture of that. This is Jimi Hendrix performing at Woodstock. You notice his dress here, the beads, and kind of the Native American look. And all these people, and they wrapped all the way around. I mean, like as far as you could see, all these people. And for 3 days, they came and went. They basically lived there on this property for 3 days and did whatever on this property for 3 days. All right? Just living outside, listening to the music. Okay? All right, drugs. So about this time, there's a Harvard professor, believe it or not, who does this research and claims that LSD, if you use LSD, it'll actually give you a heightened awareness of reality. And he's really tapping into this counterculture. So you have this heavy drug experimentation during this time, included marijuana. I mean, that's probably what the 60s are most known for. But really, the drug of choice, new hallucinogenic, can't say it, drug, LSD. LSD is going to be the thing that everyone wants to get their hands on. And this culture, this is a very famous line. They begin to tune in to the music, turn on to each other, and drop out. Drop out of what their parents wanted to do, drop out of any kind of like school or any kind of set norm. They're going to totally resist the norm, the culture of the 50s as it was before. And they're going to turn on to this drug scene. I've got music, often included lyrics that promoted the drug use. You see that a lot in their lyrics and things. Because of this LSD invasion, lots of young people become addicts and destroy themselves. And this is actually the beginning of the first major drug issue we have in the United States, and what will become the war on drugs from this LSD usage. So some serious hardcore drugs are going to be introduced, and others, as you know, follow this. Heroin, etc. So the LSD, not a good thing. Okay, really bad. All right, so sex. So they're going. Two factors increase this sexual exploitation of the youth. Antibiotics to treat all the venereal diseases they're going to get. I call them the creepy crawlies that they get from promiscuous sex, basically, and birth control. So there was this incorrect belief that if you took birth control pills, you were going to be obviously not pregnant, but you were also going to prevent anything else, which was not true, any kind of STD. So they're tempted to engage in casual sex, multiple partners. Again, with the pill, they're not going to get pregnant, they think. No chance. And with antibiotics, they could cure any disease. Well, you know, when you mix antibiotics and the birth control pill, you can get pregnant. So you have more children born out of wedlock during this time. Okay. Also, it says advertisements, magazines, movies promote this openly sexual activity. And then in the 80s, there's this backlash against all of this as AIDS is first diagnosed in the United States. We'll get to that when we get to the 80s. But the conservative sector of the United States, most of these parents are going to be absolutely horrified that their children are involved in these activities. Really horrified. Okay, so let's go back to our essential questions. In what ways do the youth of the 60s rebel against their traditional families and upbringing? With their clothing, with their lifestyle, like the communal living, no longer living at home with their parents, but living in these group communes where anything goes, with just openly sexual relationships with as many people as they can get, and of course the serious LSD use that comes on the stage. Okay, and then why do they rebel? That's the million-dollar question. A lot of people think it was because of just the seriousness of their parents and the culture they were raised up in after World War II with the Red Scare and just so much focus on how our government should be and how we needed to prevent the spread of communism and just so much structure there that they just wanted out of all of that. And they wanted just to be free and, you know, have their love child and, you know, not worry about so many rules and expectations that their parents had. So that's certainly one good reason why they rebel. Another thing that's going to bring an even heightened sense of rebellion is going to be the Vietnam War. So, you know, as we get more and more into that, you'll see these two kind of conflict, and yet, in a way, go together. The military guys are going to conflict with this counterculture movement, but the counterculture movement, with their anti-war protests, which we'll get to soon, that's really going to kind of fuel the flame of counterculture, the Vietnam War, and draw them even more into this promiscuous, drug use, rebellious culture. Okay? All right. I don't know if any of you have anybody in your family that grew up during the 60s. I do, and I can only speak for them, but a lot of them are still very rebellious. So it's interesting how it really, I mean, they're much older now, but in some ways, this is still with them, the 60s. They haven't changed all that much. They look different as they're older, but in some ways, they still carry that around with them. So it is, you know, we've had presidents serve as president that came through this time period, and they served differently because of that. All right, you guys have a good evening, and I'll see you in class tomorrow.